So, Glenn, we're in a massive change in the Vineyard, which I don't think we've talked much about, which is a lot of our churches are being handed over.
Yep.
So we have really a major generational transfer of succession of churches. You've stepped into in a succession process and your church had already existed.
Yeah.
What would be wisdom, counsel? What did you see that churches, the pastors who were handing the church away did well, like for you, or you've watched, or even incoming?
Yeah.
What would be wisdom?
I mean, just so, Vineyard pastors are aware, this is actually, it tracks with nationwide trends. There is a larger sort of picture here where there's a lot of pastors who are trying to wrestle with this exact same question.
Yeah.
And I think the first thing you have to do is identify a very clear process and who you're going to let speak into and shape that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say, just anecdotally, in a couple of different environments, situations with friends and all that, the people who try to only have insiders or in-house people speak into the process, it's usually messier because you just have loyalty biases and something that's good. You want the people closest to you.
You need that, right.
You want the people closest to you to love you.
But not just that.
And
right,
not just
right.
that.
Yeah, right.
You need some outsider perspectives to go, so, but either way, a clear process. And part of that process is the voices that can shape it, but also a timeline. You need a bit of a timeline here. Like, is this a 2-year thing? Is this a 4-year thing? Right. What are the benchmarks along the way? That a very, very clear process is helpful. I think the other thing is, one of the things Todd did really well. So Todd Proctor led Rock Harbor for many, many years, stepped out for a season, and then was able to step back in kind of this interim moment and bring guidance, bring wisdom. And one of the things Todd did so well was he focused the church on prayer, which sounds like a spiritual answer. It's really like the most essential thing a church can be doing in this season. And of course, there's funny versions of this when you think about the Catholics and conclaves and they go to
right.
But the spirit of that idea is we're going to inquire of the Lord, And so for all of us in our charismatic, evangelical, whatever traditions, the church needs to embrace a season of prayer. But in order to do that, and in order for the transition to go well, you also then need some pruning. The best transitions that I've heard of, some big churches in Southern California, some in New York that I'm familiar with, is to pare down a bit of what the church is doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes the worst thing you can do is to hand over the whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, I got to be careful here because sometimes people, because of their ego, go, well, nobody else could do what only I could lead the enterprise. Okay, I don't mean that.
No.
But I do mean if you can simplify what you're handing over. So it could look, if you're multi-site, maybe you autonomize some of the sites.
Yeah.
If you're running 10 different programs, maybe you pare it down. For Rock Harbor, it was also coming out of the pandemic and there were other dynamics. It was simpler to say, you know what, let's focus on a few essentials.
Yeah.
And what that does is it leaves white space for the new pastor to begin to put their imprint on it. The gift I was given is a church that was clear about its identity, but still had room to build and create, room for creativity. Oftentimes you don't get both.
Right.
If a church is clear about its identity, it's like, please don't touch this. The Lego has been assembled.
Run the play.
Run
just do what we tell you to do. Right.
Don't break the Legos, And that can be really frustrating.
Yeah.
Or if there is room for creativity, there's such confusion about our identity. Who are we? What are we going to be? Are we liturgical? Are we?
Right.
And so give that kind of clarity, but then allow some room here for creativity. So those are some of the gifts that could really help pastors. I think for the outgoing pastor, a sense of purpose is really, really important. I don't believe in the kingdom we retire.
Right.
I think there's always purpose, but our place and our pace will change.
Yeah.
And so if the outgoing leader doesn't have another way to direct their sense of
where
purpose,
are you going? Right. Totally.
they're just going to keep meddling. Hey, I don't like this. You might think about, and they can't help themselves. You're a leader. That's why.
Yeah, they're in the room.
You're
totally.
in the room.
Yeah.
So you got to have something else if you're the outgoing leader to put your hands to.
That's good. That's really good. Okay. And then as an incoming leader, some of what you're describing is assessing all of that.
Yeah.
So my job is to tell who's who, what's the history. I'm harmonizing with the song, so to speak. What would you recommend? How did you do that?
Yeah, I do think your first year, and there's consultants who use this, I'm borrowing language from somebody, your first year really is orientation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a mistake for the incoming leader to come in with, and my agenda day one, It's not like the opposite party presidency, where you're trying to make a radical departure.
Right.
Oftentimes that's a mistake. Even in a church post-scandal. I got to watch that, sort of have front row seats on staff, but watching when the leader came in and replaced the leader who had fallen at New Life. You might think that's an occasion to be like, okay, we're going to change everything.
Yeah.
I think you have to be very wise here. You're still learning context and culture, particularly if you're coming from the outside.
Yeah.
So there might be a longer on-ramp of orientation, and use the tools of a good cultural anthropologist. Discern what's the uniqueness of this church's calling and this church's culture. I use a 5-fold grid here for culture. What are the stories they keep telling? A lot of times it's origin stories. I mean, when I met with loads and loads of people that first year, and everyone from after a while is like, oh, I'm hearing the same.
Yeah. Tell me about this place.
Yeah.
And they tell you the same.
Same 3 or 4 stories.
Well, this thing happened that one time.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So key stories. It's as old as, human civilizations. We sit around fires and tell stories. I want to know the old stories. I want to know language. I want to know our rituals and practices. I want to look at what artifacts we've made. Has this church had books, music, training resources? What are the artifacts? And then in some ways, to a lesser degree, the tools, like what are the current tools and systems?
Right.
Now, you can begin to change that, but I really think you'd be better off if you built on that and slightly adjusted it.
Yes.
So you go, okay, we got some new stories we're telling now. We've got some, maybe I'm synthesizing our language. We used to say it with these 10 words. We're now going to say it with these 3 words, or, and all of that is really helpful work, but you're really doing that post year 1.
Yeah, that's really good.